I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with two of my friends from Bitdefender. I'm here with Danny Clayton and also Jarret Raim, and we're going to talk about Bitdefender and some of the MDR work you guys are doing, maybe a little bit about yourselves too. It'll be fun. Welcome to New York.
Well, thank you.
It's nice to see you guys.
It's good to be here.
Jarret, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about the company and maybe some of the background in Bitdefender. It's a very familiar company, but maybe some people are perhaps less familiar with the company.
Sure. So Bitdefender's been around almost 20 years now. Cybersecurity company based in Romania primarily is where it was founded and is where a lot of the staff still is. Primary focus historically has been on anti-malware, kind of virus type products. And has generally been very successful in that market. So we tend to get rated as the #1 anti-malware platform for years and years and years. And it's mostly due to, for us, a big focus on research and development. So we have a significant percentage of our staff that's focused really on kind of pure R&D around different types of malware and how those malware have changed over time. And so like the first machine learning based AV was us like years and years and years ago. So a lot of the papers and stuff like that have our names on it. So it's been very exciting, and obviously they decided to have been in the US for quite a while now. And then Danny and I came on at the beginning of this year specifically to help them move into kind of the services and kind of outcome-driven space that Bitdefender's been looking at right now. Obviously, the market's changing over time, and folks are looking for help in using a lot of these very sophisticated, cybersecurity tools. And so that's really what they hired Danny and I to do. We've have experience doing that at previous roles, and so we came over here to help them build that.
That's exciting. We're going to dig into those services. I'm super interested in that. But kind of back to Bitdefender, it seems like a lot of the big successful companies have that heritage kind of in malware and dealing with that. Does that help? Does that give you some solidity sort of at the technical level with the people who started with those problems?
Certainly. I mean, so many of the folks in our labs organization have spent years and years as malware researchers, right? And as a successful kind of anti-malware company, we have 500 million plus endpoints and all that, right? And so you get this massive amount of telemetry, right, that allows us to really see trends as they're moving through the market. And from a services perspective, that's very helpful to us, right? Because we can start to really see what those things are happening as they flow across the customer base, and we can make changes. And so, having the ability to kind of go to a labs organization and be like, we have this problem, like, could you guys fix it? And they go away for 6 months and they come back with something that actually works, right? And so that kind of stuff is really nice compared to just having to go buy things off the shelf, right?
That's great. Danny, you've got an operational background, know a lot about threat. What kind of brought you to Bitdefender? What was your story in coming to the company?
Couple of reasons really. So I spent 23 years in British intelligence and really spent the majority of my career building and then running intelligence and security operations and operations centres, both in far off places like Iraq and Afghanistan, but also on both sides of the Atlantic for organisations like NSA and GCHQ as well. And my first opportunity in the commercial sector enabled me to go and build a security operations centre for commercial customers, which was an entirely different type of challenge, with the rise of the APT. And if you go back 4 or 5 years and you think about what was going on in the market at that time, a lot of really big organisations were being hacked. From government organisations to big companies like Sony and Home Depot and these companies as well. So it was a real challenge to go and build something that had to defend against lots and lots of different types of customers in different industry verticals. And so we did that. We were relatively successful doing that. And then Bitdefender came and spoke to us about coming and building something similar with them. And they come with this kind of heritage, this technology heritage, and 17, 18 years of building some of the best technology platforms that are out there on the market. And really for me, the technology is what we're going to arm our people with, with my background. That it was interesting to me that we take the best technology out there and then go and arm some of the best analysts with it, and then see what they can do against some of the most sophisticated threats. So that was a big piece of it. And then the other thing for me was security operations today need to be directed by threat intelligence. If you're being directed by the market, you're always going to be behind where the bad guys are going. And Bitdefender and their labs organization were heavily invested, had a very large threat intelligence collection capability, which they were using to drive their anti-malware technology. So the opportunity to take that capability and then operationalize it within the Security Operations Center was something that was very attractive to me.
Yeah. Danny, I remember I used to think that the intelligence community dealt with one threat, commercial, a much lighter, less intense, less consequential set of issues. Have they converged? Like as you build out for Bitdefender, do you find, well, it's kind of the same advanced threats, or is there still kind of a difference?
No, it's very much converged.
It has converged.
Yeah, and in two ways. It's really
Depressing.
interesting. I would have thought, well, at the time I got out of British intelligence in 2013, and I felt the same way. I thought that it was going to be a different threat, different TTPs, a different experience altogether. Yeah. I didn't find that. What we found when we built the operation and we started defending customers, we found two things. One was that the technologies and the tools and the tactics that were being used by adversaries against commercial customers were very much the same as what we were seeing at the national level. So there was a transfer of TTPs. But then what we also started to see as we started to deal with nation state attacks at the commercial sector was that it's not only the TTPs that are being that have kind of converged, but it's actually many times it's the same hackers, it's the same groups, it's actually the Chinese and the Russians, and the guys that we were preoccupied with at the national sector are targeting commercial organisations, and we're having to defend against them as well. So it's very much converged and has done it in two ways. And in fact, a lot of our guys, because of my background and the background of so many of my team, we pulled a lot of people direct out of the US Air Force. So when they were ready to retire, we'd never go and take them out before they were ready. But as soon as they were ready to retire, they took their uniforms off, kind of put a civilian T-shirt on, and came and sat in our chairs and found
drove
they
to
were
the
doing
other
the same
part,
job.
other side of San Antonio, to a different building.
And fighting the
Smart
same
move.
guys, right?
That's some good people there. Some of the best in the world. Now, Jarret, I know you spend a lot of time thinking about the product. Tell me what some of the feature functionality is that would be considered table stakes for kind of an operational support structure. I think you referred to it as like a modern security operational approach. Tell me about that.
So I think the modern security operation is what underlies the product, which is managed detection and response, right? And when you look at the various analyst groups of the world, and MDR has become kind of a thing that we agree on, right? It's not fully baked yet, but we kind of understand the shape of it, right? And so what we've generally seen is a modern security operation is a 24/7 capability, that it is proactive in some way, usually through the process of something like threat hunting or something along those lines, where you're stepping into a customer's environment to look for evidence of adversarial behavior rather than just waiting for a tool to tell you that something's going on, right? And then some kind of response based on that, right? So, and response can vary pretty wildly depending on who you go and look at. And all of that's powered by threat intelligence. And the reason it's become different from what we would used to call a managed security service provider or an MSSP is just that MDRs tend to be very opinionated about the technology stack. So the sale process and the understanding from a customer of what you were buying is very different, right? When you were buying an MSSP, it was an outsourcing play, right? It was like, I bought some stuff, I want you guys to go monitor it for me 24/7. Right. MDRs are much more, you're buying a business outcome. So what you want to buy is risk reduction to the business, and you don't want to make the investments of time and energy and focus in building a 24/7 security operations center, which can be very expensive and challenging. Instead, you're going to let someone else go and do that, and you're going to buy a small slice of it.
Help me understand kind of the balance between automation and having people in centers, like human beings. Is there a balance? Do you think it should all be automated, all people? What's your philosophy?
So I think we will never see a scenario in which you have a SOC that is fully automated, right? The level of expertise that you can get and how that the adversary changes over time means that you're always going to have expertise on the defense side. Now, where we have seen a lot
human
of
expertise.
Human expertise.
We should probably call Elon Musk, right? He would disagree.
Yes, well,
I agree with you, by
Elon's
the way.
wrong about that. But,
I think he is too.
But in this case, I think so much of what analysts used to do was kind of rote grunt work that didn't need expertise to be done, right?
There was tier one.
Yeah, there was a lot of logging into 5 different websites and cut and pasting things together and using the SIM to kind of pull some data together so that they could see it, all to get to the point where you could pass it to someone in a level 2 or level 3 capability who could do something with that data. That's great opportunities for automation, right? Because that's stuff that we can get rid of, and now our lower level analysts can really spend their time using their expertise as opposed to cut and pasting around from VirusTotal, right?
No, I think that's awesome. So Danny, how do you implement something like that and keep the TCO and the investment? Well, how do you keep this to be a high value proposition? Because when you balance people with with technology and automation, you have to know what you're doing, and I know you do. What's kind of the secret sauce there?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. The first thing I'd say is it's important to build a capabilities-based organization, right? So we're what I would describe as a full spectrum target. You know, Bitdefender, we have customers in every industry vertical, in every geographical region on the planet, and so every threat group out there is going to be interested in us in some way. And so is the security team. What we're interested in.
Good and bad news, right?
Yeah, so the security organization, it means we have to be ready to defend against all different types of threats, right? So if I'm building a security operations center for my company and I happen to be in the oil and gas industry, then I'm going to get very interested about, you know, what threat groups are interested in that industry vertical, what TTPs do they use, what types of people do they have, how do they attack people, and I'm going to go and build a capability to defend against that. As a full spectrum target that is going to be defending against every type of bad guy out there, we have to understand what capabilities we need to defend against all of the TTPs that are being used. And also we need to keep a very close eye on how those TTPs are evolving over time so that we maintain capabilities to mitigate those threats as they evolve. So security organizations often are born out of the IT organization, and the problem with that is that it's technology, right? So often what's happened is a company has been chasing the latest flux capacitor and gone out and bought the latest security tool, and so some poor guy comes to work one day and he gets told, hey, watch this tool, and, you know, congratulations, you're a security analyst now.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that if you're chasing technology all the time, what you wind up with is really complex toolkit within the security organization. It's really common when I talk to customers, and complexity is the enemy of security. So you really want the capability that you're trying to build to dictate the technology that you buy, and not the other way around. Okay, if you do it the other way around, then you wind up with too many tools, not enough efficiency, not the right automation, all of those things. Yeah. If you build a capability-based organization, then you're much more focused on the outcome that you're trying to deliver, the threat that you're trying to mitigate. Okay, so that's the first point that I wanted to make about being a capabilities-based organization. The second thing that you have to do is, now you've reduced the complexity within your toolkit, the next thing that you do is automate as much as you can of the lower skilled work. Okay, so
rote tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we're looking for, when I choose technology and when we pull the operation together, we're looking to enable the analyst as much as we can. The reason why we pay a lot of money for our analysts, and the reason why analysts are so difficult to find, is because it's such a highly skilled job now. You know, the hackers that we're up against, especially at the national level, are so well are so skilled and are so good at what they do that you really need an equally skilled analyst to be able to defend an enterprise against that type of hacker. So we use automation to deal with as much of the lower level work as we can, to provide our analysts with as much visibility and information and data as we possibly can, so that they can see everything that's going on in the environment and then make the right decisions. You know, at the end of the day, the security team is there to make sure that the chief security officer knows if you're being attacked, and then is able to do something about that attack when it happens. And so that's what you want to use automation for, is to free up the time for the analyst to do that.
How often do you become part of someone's workflow, where you guys are a piece of it, but you have to link somehow into a broader process workflow for a customer, as kind of the response component?
Yeah, absolutely, often.
And the automation would be the way you do that, like through an API or
something? Sometimes. So there's different ways in which we deal with that. When we first set out to build MDR the first time, we were very clear at the time that, you know, security was the type of sphere where we needed to be very careful about the way that we shared information with customers, for a couple of reasons. One, because it might be highly sensitive, but also because a security event for a medium-sized company or even a larger company can be an Armageddon event for that company. So it's very important that we dealt with an event not only very efficiently and very quickly, meaning that we knew who to call and when to call them and how to get the right people on the phone at the right time to make the right decisions, but also that we handled it in a way that was sensitive as well, and really kept everybody calm and enabled us to deal with the incident as effectively as we possibly could. So the first thing we did was create a customer success team. So our customers have named account managers, and it serves two functions. First of all, it gives the customer a member of their team on our team, so somebody that they know, they have their number on speed dial. If they have questions about what's going on in the operation, what does this alert mean, hey, one of my competitors just got attacked in this way, am I protected against that type of attack? They have a named person that they can go to that will give them those answers. But then it's also important for that customer success person to get to know the business, to understand the business, because the better we know the business, the better we can defend it. You know, security is about, it's not about preventing attacks, it's about minimizing business impact. So the more we know about the business, the better decisions that we can make, the better positioned we are to help customers look around corners to understand, hey, we're going to do this next year. What do I need to do to make sure I'm doing that in the most secure way possible? How do I manage risk based on what I want to do next year? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, it's very important that we're able to share as much information in real time with customers as we possibly can, because the security operations team or the security team within our customers' organization will have use for the data that we're providing for them, and they'll just want to know what's going on from a trust and confidence perspective. So we enable the customers in real time to see the same telemetry that we see via dashboarding on the Bitdefender portal.
Interesting. So Jarret, we've obviously traveled through the justification for this technology. Tell me about the product. So we haven't talked much about the Bitdefender product. It's called MDR, and what are, as you guys are talking to clients, what are some of the key differentiators? I would imagine support for the kinds of things we talked about, but tell us about the product a little bit.
Sure. So when we looked at the MDR space, right, it's still growing and it's still changing over time. And so we noticed some things that we felt that the traditional market wasn't really addressing for a lot of the customers that we talk to, right? And so, you know, we have Danny, who has a massive amount of experience in intelligence, and so we can build the threat intelligence components, which drives, you know, threat hunting and all that. So we think we've built the best threat hunting operation there is, right? Everyone else will tell you the same thing, right?
But we're right.
But we're right.
Good for you.
You know, so we cared about that. The other things that we saw was an increasing kind of change in most customer environments around the makeup of what they consider their network, right? So it is becoming less and less capable for us to say, oh, hey, well, we'll just put agents on all your stuff and then we can see everything. Because there's far more things in a customer's environment, if they even have a perimeter that exists anymore.
Big hybrid arrangement.
Sure, right? And you've got unmanaged devices, you've got phones, you've got IoT stuff, you've got all these other things that are floating around in the network now. And so we felt like it was very important to really marry the traditional MDR view of being very endpoint specific with a view of being kind of network or adding network visibility to that capability. So we let customers just do pure endpoint if they want to go that direction, but we really think that it's better to really pair a network visibility component along with an endpoint component. And that allows us to just have much better visibility of what's going on in the environment, and track things like if your security camera is DDoSing someone, like we can see those types of things, which we couldn't put an agent on that. And then finally, we felt like the last thing that we really saw that was very valuable for customers, you know, MDR is managed detection and response, and we really felt like the response side of things was getting a little short shrift, right? A lot of response for most kind of companies seems to be a notification process. Well, they'll tell you what they saw. The good ones will give you recommendations about what to go do. The really good ones will get on the phone with you and try to help you do it, but fundamentally you as the company are responsible for executing those actions. And in a modern security operation, the primary goal is to reduce the time that the adversary is in the environment, right? So we really want to make sure that, you know, if we can deal with them, detect them and evict them from the environment in the minutes to hours time frame, we have a much better chance of preventing business impact, as Danny was talking about, right? So a breach happens, right? The adversary got in, they got access to something that they shouldn't. But if we can keep them from pivoting, keep them from getting to the database or whatever it happens to be, we can prevent that breach from turning into a business impacting event, right? And so we do that through a process that we call pre-approved actions. And so we sit down with customers during onboarding. So out of the context of an incident, right? You don't want to do it when it's an emergency and it's 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, right? We do it up front and we say, if we see this type of activity in your environment, here's the action that we would take. Are you okay with us doing that without calling you? And that can be modern, or that can be very manual attacks, an adversary or an analyst kind of going
like
in.
Almost like a whitelist.
Yeah, so it allows an analyst to go in and make changes to the environment. And some of that can be automated in that we can reach out and touch customers' Active Directories and reach out and touch their firewalls or do things on the endpoints. And so these can be really minimal things like rotate a password or kill a process or quarantine a file, all the way up to things like isolate that host, turn it off. Right, block its network visibility or remove it from the network, and so that gives the analysts a lot of options about how they deal with an adversary in the environment. And so we think about it very much as a break glass type thing. It's a triage. We're going to stop the bleeding, right? Then there's an after action process where we go through and provide reporting that tells you what we saw and what we did and tries to help the customer understand what they need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because all that's still very important. But in the moment, the goal is stop the adversary from doing what they're doing, kick them out of the environment, make sure that they don't damage the business, and then we can figure out the rest when it's not an emergency, right? So we felt that that was a very important component. We haven't seen a lot of folks really focusing on that side of response. And so we built some platforms, we built some expertise and some process to be able to kind of marry all those things together to deliver that.
Now, we know big companies love this stuff, but have you guys been able to peek down market a little bit? I would imagine mid-market maybe even down a little bit.
So we think the primary user of an MDR should really be the mid-market to small enterprise, right? The folks who have a real business, they have revenue at risk. They
Sub-Fortune 200 or 300?
Sure,
Something like that.
And so those folks, like when they go back to their board and they say, hey, I need more money for security, right? You can go back and ask for 10%. You can't go and ask for 10x.
True.
And building a SOC is so expensive that they shouldn't spend that kind of money. So MDR makes sense for them. For the enterprise, most enterprise folks have made investments in security. They may have some kind of SOC. And we are seeing an increasing number of enterprises who have a security operations center, but they want to offload the block and tackle. So they want their folks focused on business impacting projects like the move to cloud or an IT transformation or something that requires a lot of more architectural security support, as opposed to, hey, let's deal with the most recent phish attack. And so we're seeing more and more of the enterprise wanting to maybe offload some of those functions to an MDR type view. But the primary view for us has always been that kind of mid-market to small enterprise, because those are the folks that they can't do this on their own and really shouldn't, even if they want to, just because it's just too much money that they should spend on something else. Yeah.
Danny, as you guys are onboarding customers, I'm curious, with your capability-led approach, I would imagine all sectors you're willing to deal with, but are there some sectors where you go, oh my gosh, like is power and water harder than banking, or is government harder than commercial? Are there some sectors that stick out now as having particularly tough, like maybe OT, I would think would be the new
So there
challenge.
are, but to be honest, that's not really adversary driven, right? So I think there aren't particularly industry verticals that I'm particularly concerned about from the point of view that they're going to be attacked by more sophisticated attackers or anything like that. The challenge really is compliance. Okay, so within the financial sector, for example, and then government's another good example, there's so much more compliance regulations that it changes the way that we do things and the way that we have to provide evidence and the way that we have to report. So those are much harder. When we're onboarding those customers, you kind of take a few deep breaths.
So a bank and a retail organization both feel the same pressure in terms of, say, credit card or payment card risk, but the bank is going to have 10 times more compliance reporting and all the data handling.
Which
that's a fair point.
Have benefits and downsides, right? From the benefits perspective, sometimes you get more sophisticated vulnerability management and patching processes, which is all good for us. And sometimes it also means that everything is 9 hoops you got to jump through, and it's
good
a
for
lot
business,
harder for
but
people
not
to make.
always so good for the day-to-day operations.
So
I know that the paperwork and compliance can be pretty tedious.
And it's an offer that we've built in the past to help customers meet compliance obligations, right, for exactly that reason, because it can be so painful for them to be able to do that. But in general, like it does matter, and we will see some adversarial kind of differences between the two, but I don't know that we really think about it much from that perspective.
Not really, because of the cross-pollination with TTPs now. So, the bad guys really trained, equipped, and organized themselves before security organizations did, and they started sharing technologies and tactics and techniques long before security organizations did that, and it led to this cross-pollination across different industry verticals and across different threat groups of the same types of attacks that were being used. So often we've had to build capabilities to defend against those types of attacks across multiple industry verticals now.
Well, and when you look in a lot of these cases, just because a threat actor has the capability of levering a pretty sophisticated attack against you, they're not going to. Right? The vast majority of the time, they're going to do the stuff that works, right? They're still going to phish everybody. They're still going to log in using passwords that they've stolen or simple malware attacks against endpoints. And you're going to see that regardless of whether it's a high-level adversary or low-level adversary, because that's where they start, right? Yeah. Now, if they're not successful at that, they may escalate. But it's very rare that we're seeing an APT is going to burn a 0-day on a customer attack. Like that stuff doesn't happen that often. And so most of the time, you're seeing the same attacks just levered against different ways because the super sophisticated adversary will use it because it works.
So MDR in many ways is a reprioritization away from prevent towards detect and response, right? So in the old days, if you were a chief security officer and I gave you $1 to spend on a security operation, you'd spend 99 cents on prevent and then $1 on everything, a cent on everything else. That's changed now, and the reason why it's changed is bad guys have got so good at stealing credentials, whether that's through phishing or spear phishing or or some sort of tool that they're using to steal those credentials. And the second you have somebody on the network with legitimate credentials to be there with bad intent, now you've got a problem, because the vast majority of the tools that you've set up are not going to be able to detect that type of threat. And this is what made cyber hunting so important. I think about it now as there's kind of there's two types of detect within the environment now. You have above the threshold and below the threshold. So, like, just general badness that happens on the internet, our technology is pretty good at identifying those things and filtering it out and blocking it and preventing it. It's quite good at that. But the more sophisticated stuff that goes on, and when you've got credentials and you're on the network, now you've got to proactively go and look below the threshold that tools can look for. And that's what we use our analysts for. Because if you think about it, logically, if a tool was alerting on everything that somebody was doing with credentials to be on the network, then they would be alerting for every sysadmin that was just going about his daily business. And that's when you get into this kind of alert fatigue problem and alerting on everything, and the analysts, the SOC doesn't know what to respond to.
I think I totally agree. I'm just curious, if you wanted to turn the squelch up and maybe do MDR on indicators, then it really does become preventive, right? It's just, in some sense, there's a determination as to whether, if I see some anomaly, it's not a break-in, but it's a hint, I know you guys are chasing that down.
Sure.
That sounds like prevention to me. That's why I always think when we say people are shifting right, I just think it's a different model. Like, I always thought the prevent, detect, respond concept was never a really good way of looking at it, because I always think detection and response, when done properly, is preventive, because you're looking at things and you're catching things.
You're preventing different things, right? So, like,
prevent anomalies from building into an attack.
we want to prevent a business impactful event.
Sounds like a prevention action to me.
Yeah, exactly. It is. You're preventing impact to the business.
Yeah.
You're not preventing a server from being compromised or a credential from being lost, which historically is kind of what we talked about when we talked about like an anti-malware prevention platform. It's like, well, we're going to kill it before it runs, which is still good, and you still need to do that. It eliminates a lot of the noise, as Danny was saying. So I think it does change a little bit, but I agree with you. I mean, you are fundamentally trying to prevent damage to the business.
I think when people say, well, give up, you're going to get attacked, just respond, I think that's wrong. I think it's more the way modern computing works. Software runs places, and it comes from weird places, and we enable all of that, and we celebrate that. That's what makes the internet work. But amidst all that, when something's anomalous, you deal with it. And it's not really a hack if somebody's tried something, it didn't work. That seems to me like a normal minute.
Well, it's a pretty common structure we've seen with customers who historically have deployed anti-malware platforms for years and years and years. And then they go, oh, okay, anti-malware doesn't work, right? So we're going to deploy EDR. It's a modern next gen, we're going to deploy it. And then they deploy it and they get like 1,000 alerts. Right. And it doesn't really work for them. And it's like, well, it's not that anti-malware was ineffective. It was effective at doing what it did. It's just the adversaries, and the adversaries adjusted to that. And now there are other things. So to Danny's point around, like, we talked a lot with customers around allocations, right? If I give you the buck for security, it's not that you're spending a buck on detection and response, right? You're spending way less on prevention than you used to, so that you can spend more of that, but you don't spend zero on prevention, because there still is, if we had to have an analyst run down every alert from an anti-malware platform, the SOC would have to be thousands of people and no one could afford it, right? So you do have to eliminate as much of that stuff as you can, so that stuff's still very valuable. It's just, one, the adversaries have moved around that, and two, IT has changed a lot. Like, most people don't have a perimeter anymore. Most companies are using dozens of systems that don't sit in their data centers and they have no control over, right? And so those platforms are just less impactful than they used to be, not because they got any worse, but just because the world changed underneath them. Right?
You guys are awesome. It seems like you're having a lot of fun. I suspect this must be as much labor of love as anything doing this.
It certainly is. I think it's an enjoyable space to be.
It shows.
Yeah.
You guys seem to really be enjoying it.
It's fast moving, you know, there's so many components to this, and it's something that we haven't talked about so far, but it's an important component is the cyber skills shortage at the moment, you know, and so that's a real challenge that we kind of relish, is going and finding the right people and then building careers for them so that they stay with us.
You do a career table over at Afwick, I would imagine, right?
We will grab folks from wherever we can get them, but certainly being in San Antonio and having access to AppCert and having access to NSA is very helpful to us. Right?
City. I worked for AT&T for many years, and our headquarters was in San Antonio for quite a few years, so I know that city well.
Yeah.
And it is a very, very cool cybersecurity center of excellence because of the military.
Yeah, and becoming more so. And the schools have jumped on board. There's really good cybersecurity courses in the schools in San Antonio now. So it's a great place for us to be. And you know, one of the best parts of the job is kind of building this analyst team and you know, finding some of the best experts out of the security services and the intelligence services, and then taking the knowledge and the experience that they have and spreading it amongst everybody else in the SOC as well. You talked earlier about creating a team that was kind of financially efficient, you know, not crazy expensive, and that's partly how you do it. Is you have very highly skilled people that are doing this tier 3 work at the top of the operation, but then you have 1 and 2s underneath, and a lot of that work gets automated.
You try.
But an important function there is that we turn those 1s and 2s into level 3s, right? And we make them better. And as these guys go on and be leaders somewhere and go and build SOC somewhere else, and you know, take their knowledge to a different organization, we have somebody ready to step into their shoes and do that level 3 work.
Well, you guys have a great story. I couldn't be more pleased that you came and shared. Appreciate you coming to New York.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having us.
As you guys make progress, you come back and visit.
Will do.
Nice to see you, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Good to meet you.
And we will see you next time.